Chapter 9. The First Breach. In a small, dim kitchen that could never be mistaken for a Muggle home, cauldrons, potions, vials, plants, and herbs were arranged in ordered chaos. Everything had its place, and yet the room still looked as though it had been built around work, rather than comfort. At a wooden table sat a boy of 10, pale and dark-haired, his hands folded still before him. He watched with quiet focus as his mother stood over a boiling potion. She was a pale woman, too, with dark hair twisted into a bun. She worked with a wand in one hand and a ladle in the other, stirring the potion in the cauldron over the flame. The liquid flickered and bubbled, then began to steam. "Unstable," she muttered under her breath. Then she looked at the boy. "It's simple. Even first years can manage this one." The boy leaned forward slightly, studying the potion again. He was calm, quiet, and analytical, waiting for the next instruction as though he had learned long ago that silence was safest. His mother's expression hardened. "Magic responds to intent and control," she said, the contempt and bitterness in her voice impossible to miss. "Things you don't have." The boy did not answer. Instead, he reached over, adjusted the flame under the cauldron, and added a pinch of powdered root. The potion calmed at once. It steadied. The bubbling eased. The steam thinned, and the surface became smooth again. For a moment, his mother simply stared. Then her face closed over itself. "Anyone can follow instructions," she said coolly. She tipped the potion out into the sink. The boy watched it spill away, expressionless as the liquid disappeared down the drain. It was a pleasant day in Diagon Alley. The shops were busy, the pavements crowded, and the stone steps leading up to the storefronts were being swept by owners and assistants trying to keep ahead of the day's traffic. There was a good energy in the air, a sense that the city had settled back into itself. More people were out than usual. That was because it was the second anniversary of the Battle of Hogwarts. The feeling in the alley was one of earned peace. There had been enough fear, enough loss, enough brokenness. Now people walked a little more easily, as if life had at last agreed to continue. Secluded in a quieter part of the alley stood the Diagon Dispensary, an old apothecary smaller than the others and far less crowded, though it carried items the more fashionable shops did not. Potion masters knew the difference in quality, even if most customers never would. Inside, the shelves were packed tight with glass jars and wooden barrels. Labels covered nearly every inch of space, and dust lay in layers over older dust. Mr. Hollis, the shopkeeper, was at the counter as a customer left. Then the bell over the door rang. Outside, a man paused. He reached into the folds of his black cloak and withdrew a metallic mask, which he set over his face. He checked a pocket watch, waited a moment, and then stepped inside. 1. The bell chimed above him. 2. He took out a vial of purple liquid, flicked the cork, and uncorked it. The liquid unfurled into a thin mist, almost invisible, like breath in winter air. 3. He moved toward the back of the shop at a slow, measured pace. 4. He passed Mr. Hollis, who stood staring at the register with a confused, vacant expression, as though he had forgotten what it was for. 5. 2 other customers stood nearby, frozen with puzzled looks. 6. The masked man reached a shelf labeled potion stabilizers and took the entire stack of bottles. He shoved them into a small shoulder bag that seemed far too small to hold them all, yet somehow did. 7. He turned and saw Mr. Hollis looking out of the window with a lost, desperate expression. 8. He walked toward the exit. 9. He glanced back at the 2 customers, both still staring off as though they were listening to something no one else could hear. 10. The bell rang again as he left, and everything in the shop settled back into place. Mr. Hollis blinked. "And that will be 3 sickles," he said to no one in particular. Strange, he thought. He stood behind the counter, frowning slightly. "Did I just—" He looked around the shop. Something was off, but he could not quite say what. The 2 customers were still there, a couple who had been looking for something he could no longer remember. He felt that he had missed something important, but no memory of it would come. So he shook it off. The next day, Harry Potter and Ron Weasley sat at their desks in the Auror office, surrounded by reports, all of them minor incidents, all of them dull enough to be irritating. There had not been a serious case since the leaky cauldron incident 3 months before. Ron flipped through one and snorted. Missing inventory at that old potion shop on Diagon Alley. Thrilling. Harry took the report from him and read it more carefully. He doesn't remember selling it. Ron shrugged. People forget things, especially shopkeepers. Harry kept reading. It says the shoplift charm was in place, which prevents petty theft with an alarm, but it was never activated, and he wrote down that he didn't remember selling it 3 times. Something is going on here. We should follow up on this one. Soon afterward, Harry and Ron stepped through the door of the Diagon Dispensary, and the bell chimed overhead. Mr. Hollis looked up from behind the counter. "Oh, yes. Thank you for coming," he said at once. "I know it's not a big deal, but it's just so mysterious." Harry glanced around the shop. "You're sure you didn't forget selling it or misplacing it?" Hollis cut him off. "I don't lose track of stock, and those potion stabilizers have been on that shelf for years. I only sell them once in a blue moon. I'd remember selling my whole stock." Harry considered that. "Do you have a ledger tied to inventory?" "Yes, of course," Hollis said. "I rarely look at it because I keep it all in my head, see." He pulled out a thick leather-bound book, set it on the table, and tapped it with his wand. It opened to the last page. Hollis peered down at it. It didn't log a sale or theft? Ron folded his arms. Well, then they must still be here. Harry lifted his wand. Accio Potion Stabilizer. Nothing happened. Hollis frowned. I know every inch of this shop. It's not here. This is strange. Ron began walking slowly through the aisles, studying the shelves. You're not going to find it, Hollis said. As I said, I know every inch. It's not that, Ron said, frowning. Harry and Hollis both looked at him. Ron glanced around once more before answering. I can't explain it, but it feels like the magic was wiped clean. Harry looked puzzled. Hollis only made a thoughtful noise and said, A little later, Harry and Ron stepped back into the bright sunshine outside the shop. Ron looked around at the crowds moving through the alley, still busy even on a Tuesday. Oh yeah, it's the second anniversary of the BOH. Nice to see things getting back to normal. Well, almost. Harry nodded slowly. Right, this one is strange. Ron gave him a sideways look. So what, someone nicked a few ingredients and forgot to leave a trace? No, Harry said. They made sure there wasn't one. Ron let out a long breath. Now it's a case. Across the street, where the crowd had thickened since Harry and Ron entered the apothecary, stood a man in a ministry maintenance uniform, pushing a janitorial cart. He was about 30, pale, dark-haired, and still as stone among the moving shoppers. He watched Harry and Ron emerge from the Diagon dispensary. His gaze was intense, but not hurried. He did not look panicked. He did not seem threatened. He simply observed them for a moment, then turned his cart and disappeared into the crowd. As Harry and Ron walked back out of Diagon Alley, Harry said to himself, half aloud, This isn't just random theft. Ron gave him a quick side eye and nodded, as if he was already thinking the same thing.